And today I am so excited for our guest. I have Eric Morin on the show. Eric, welcome to the show.
So excited to be here. Very, very excited. Thank you for having
Hey,
me.
just for clarity, and I probably should have done this before recording, but we're going to just be casual. Is it Morin?
Morin,
Morin?
yes.
Eric Morin.
You can throw accent on it if you want to. But yeah, Eric Morin's great.
Well, it's French, right? So if I threw the
That's right.
accent on, what would that sound like?
I don't know. We can give it a shot. No, I'm just kidding. That's good. Glad to be here.
Great. Well, Eric, give us a little background. Tell us about you.
You know, Chelsea, I won't get too long, but I'll give you my quick intro into the dental world and how I ended up here, which was MBA who married a dentist, and that's the rest is history. No, I'm just kidding. I came in this industry. I was actually helping businesses that were up to about 20 million by myself, and then I married a dentist who asked me to help start a dental practice, which at the time, I always say one of the greatest things that happened to me was I didn't know anything about dental practices. So I just thought you grew and scale a dental practice. Like I didn't know that you weren't supposed to do that. And so I just started hiring doctors and wanting to grow. And I thought, and this was back, almost 20 years ago. So it was a different time in the dental world when that wasn't happening. And that led to, it started off with a specialist asking me to help another general practitioner. And then before you know it, I was working with thousands of doctors all over the country and sometimes outside the country. And then I went back and got all my investment licenses at some point because I was watching people take money out of a dental practice doing 30% and putting it into an investment account doing 4 or 5%. I didn't really understand why somebody would do that. So I went and got all my investment licenses, and which led me to the ability to sit down with somebody and just ask them, what do you want? What do you want in this world? What do you want in this life? And then be able to take the business and all their assets and all the things they wanted and help them build a plan. And then ultimately we would build and scale and grow these practices and create net worth and reduce debt and all these amazing things. But then I over time realized that one of the biggest factors that was missing in organization's ability to grow and scale was leadership, which then turned me to create Tower Leadership in 2017 because I said, gosh, we've really got to start at the top of an organization and build out the leadership within inside of an organization, and then we can add all the other numbers and fundamentals and all those other types of things. So that's what leads me here today, which is loving the ability to help dentists take a dental practice and impact their life, their family's life, their team's life, and their community's life.
Wow. Yeah. And you and I, we're so aligned in the passion behind leadership and the human component of these practices and organizations. And that's one of the reasons I just love you. And I'm so excited you're here today. Can you talk to me a little bit about that pivot from, helping people scale their practices and get their financial health in order to, did it trickle in over time, or did you have to make a giant leap? What did that look like?
That's a great question. I think I get curious, right? We all kind of get curious sometimes. I think I was curious about this, the doctors that were really transforming their practices significantly and the ones that were stuck. And I think that's always like a question. It's like, why did they get stuck and this other one just exploded? And then I was watching and I found that there was this correlation between leadership and caring about people, empathy and trying to build team and trying to cultivate leadership, and that correlation between that and success and the ability to grow and scale. And then I heard somebody one time refer to their team as human capital, and I thought, I'm an idealist. I was like, okay, someone's got to put a stop to this. And so I think that there was an intrinsic. I am an idealist and an optimist, and while I'm very practical in finance and in business, I still, that idealist side says, hey, look, you can take those ideals and build an amazing organization. If we look at the history of great organizations, that's what's happened over and over again. And so there was a shift in my brain, and I think it was that idealist part of my brain that says, hey, listen, if you will go focus on building leadership inside your practice, if you'll focus on you, right, to have more, you become more, to create success, you become success, and to have success, and to focus on your own ability to impact your life and those around you. When you focus on that, the rest of it starts to fall in line. I'll tell you a quick story. I had a doctor, and this was kind of a good example. Maybe this was part of the shift. This was early on in the company. I had this doctor come to me one time, and she was struggling with her business. She had hired like 12 consultants. And I mean, she was paying, I think, 300 grand a year or something to consultants. Couldn't get anywhere. So I met her and I said to her, I said, I'll help you out as long as you'll do me a favor and fire everybody, including myself. Like, you can't pay me any money. And she's like, well, really? I said, yeah, you're not allowed to pay me or anybody, any other consultant money. And I said to her, I said, but here's the thing. You're going to read a book. You have 1 week to read the book. And if you read the book, then at the end of that week, we'll work together. So she gets through the week and she reads this book. And she's really excited, by the way. The week she says, all right, I read the book. All right, now what do we do? Let's go invest in marketing or whatever it was. And I said to her, she said, all right, what do I do? I said, you're going to read a book. I said, I'm going to give you another book. And she reads the second book. And then, week two comes along. She's really excited. She said, all right, now I've read 2 books. Now what do we do? And the third week comes along and I give her another book. And she says, oh my gosh, another book. And then it's interesting because that happened in the 4th week. By the way, I didn't give her a book in the 4th week. But the 4th week she comes to me and she says, my team's coming up to me and they're asking, why is my attitude changed? Why is my motive, like, what is my energy change? The way I'm, and so what happened was now that the team started asking, of course, what are you doing? She's like, well, I read a book. And she starts sharing this book. And what happened was in this business, which was really neat, was that because I knew the problem wasn't the business, the problem was her and her own mindset, her leadership ability. And she had went through a personal crisis, and that crisis ultimately was what was stopping the practice. So I knew by focusing on her and her own leadership, and if we could move that mindset, then we could then move the business in the direction we needed it to. And then of course she transformed it into awesome, amazing things. So I think that in that understanding how, and that's one of the reasons why when I first saw what you do, Chelsea, I was so attracted to the type of work you do. I was like, yes, we're in the same tribe. We're in the same ilk. Like we and I loved it because I was like, man, when people realize that so much of their potential can be unlocked by focusing on them, I just think that that's so powerful. And then it's we both have a passion for helping and serving people. And so that was a long-winded answer to your story, to your question, but it really goes back to, that's when I started seeing the shifts. The ability to really unlock organizations actually started with their leadership.
So that, your answer is great, and it gives me lots of launching pads to go from. I just have so many questions now. Here's the first one. So you had an area of expertise. You know how to, you're fluent in the language of dental finance, and you know how to take a business, get it healthy and get it growing, right? And then you discovered, to paraphrase, you discovered that there's a direct correlation between the leader and the mindset of the leader and business organization owner and their ability to reach those goals, at least as quickly as they'd like to. Here's what I know about high performers and entrepreneurs. We like challenges, which is foreign to some people. A lot of people don't like challenges. They like to extinguish them or solve them, get rid of them. We really thrive on them. We love them. They're very exciting to us. And so I'm curious to know, as passionate as you are about this human component and training and developing the leader, what do you see as the most challenging aspect of it?
I still think that there's, I was having a conversation with a high net worth group 2 weeks ago, when we were talking about vision and identity. And I think there's still, sometimes we get locked in identity. And the reason I say this is that we see ourselves as a certain person and we get locked in that identity. And to transform to the next place, we actually have to release that identity, which means you have to be good at quitting, right? And it might be quitting relationships, and it might be quitting things we did, because it's starting new things, but we have to let go of something else. And that is in itself such a challenge, right? Because it creates uncertainty, and discomfort. And people naturally do not like uncertainty and discomfort, but great leaders, great organizational leaders understand that if they do not change their vision for their life, that change their identity, if they're not continuing to grow and pushing through cycles of discomfort and uncertainty, they're going to eventually mature in their own growth and development, and then over time move into decline. And so I would say the leaders who are willing to challenge their own mindset around what is possible and not possible, and then push themselves into discomfort, which sounds absolutely crazy to do, but push yourself into discomfort and uncertainty. And I was working with this group and having them actually going through exercises that actually push them out of their current identity. And it was amazing to see. And these were all successful people. These weren't people that were struggling. These were people who had built amazing dental organizations. And even to watch them see how their own mindset and their identity had become locked into place, and how that they had created their own self-imposed limitations based on the reality that they've created in their life. And when we unlocked those new potentials, that we're going to create some discomfort and uncertainty, and they got good at quitting, or I had them list out all the things they were going to have to quit, relationships they had to quit, processes and things that they did. I think the people that are willing to do that work literally have unlimited potential. But you have to push yourself to discomfort and uncertainty. And I think that that's a challenge for people. So I think that limiting component of actually pushing yourself and to get outside of those self-imposed limitations is one of the greatest things that unlocks the human potential.
Such a powerful concept. I love that. You know, a while back, I think it was like a year and a half ago, I did a podcast episode on creating more comfort through discomfort. And the premise of it was that, you know, and you see this with our physical bodies. We do it a lot. You know, we intermittent fast, or we do the cold plunges. And so we learn to tolerate a new level of something, which we've expanded our zone of comfort. You know, now I can take cold. Now I can take 20 hours without food. But we like to protect ourselves emotionally from having to do that in our interpersonal lives or in our business lives. We don't want to deal with that kind of discomfort, right? But it is so much the same in that if you can really put yourself out there. I saw this girl actually, I think she was like on YouTube. I don't know how I found this. Anyways, but her goal was for 30 days, she was going to put herself in an uncomfortable position socially. And so she was going to go talk to a new group, or she was going to go have a difficult conversation with a family member that she knew needed to happen every single day for 30 days. And I was like, wow, that is just genius, right? Because you don't even give yourself time. If you're doing something every single day, you don't give yourself time, or at least the room to have built up excuses. You just keep doing it day after day after day. And now your brain is literally, you're trenching a new pattern, a new neural pathway of how we handle discomfort. We go towards it. We experience it. We open up to it.
So I love that you created the analogy and link between, you know, that physical and the mental. So this weekend, because I'm a nut, I said in the spa. So it was a spa, and inside the spa, so it was like I was getting a massage, and then when you walk in, there was a cold plunge pool, which was 33 degrees, which it was very cold. There was a steam sauna, and then there was a dry sauna. So because of the fact that I love this stuff and I study it, and I watched and I timed people. I know this makes me a weirdo, but I timed people to see how long they would stay in the cold plunge tank. And the average person was about, I would say, 11 seconds, right? they put their foot in, they might walk into their waist, they get right back out, right? So I'd watch that. And so then I'd watch the steam sauna, and even the heat sauna. They say you're supposed to stay in for 20 minutes. And I'd watch people, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. And so I didn't physically time them. That would be a little bit more. But I mean, mentally I would watch, because I was timing myself, could make sure I stayed in for a certain period of time. And so, but isn't that so analogous to what we're talking about? Is that in those physical conditions, those people very quickly said, it's too cold, it's too hot. So even those physical conditions, people are like, I don't want to do this for 20 minutes. I mean, I can't do this for 3 minutes. And so when we go into the mental side, which is, I think, much more difficult than if you can't stay in the steam sauna for 15 minutes, then how do you push through the mental work that it takes to truly create unlimited potential? And so there is such this correlation in watching people not push through the physical elements that they needed to, even though they know that the benefits of doing those things, they weren't willing to push through the physical. When we get into the mental, it's so much more challenging. So that period, I love what you said about being comfortable becoming, uncomfortable with this idea of discomfort. Is we have to push ourselves through phases of discomfort. And I love that idea of calling somebody and being uncomfortable and challenge and becoming great at becoming uncomfortable. Because if you become great at becoming uncomfortable, then gosh, I think you could accomplish just about anything, right? I think it's pretty phenomenal. I've never heard that term before, but I'm gonna borrow it here and there if that's okay.
You bet. It'll be my thank you for being on the show today. Yeah, I think it's so important to understand where our limitations are so that we can grow through them, and really getting underneath that. Like, what if you dissect it a little bit? It's like, okay, so you got out of the cold plunge in 11 seconds. Why? What really was the problem with being uncomfortable? We do a really excellent job, Eric, of freaking ourselves out about what discomfort means and what it's going to mean for our future. And we play it all the way through to the world just ended, when really that is probably the least likely outcome. Usually there's a big benefit on the other side of going through a temporary discomfort, but we don't even want to be uncomfortable at all, which I have, we could take that down a lot of different paths. I have strong opinions about the way that we eat and drink and spend and all the things that we do just to create momentary comfort and pleasure. But really, I think that the awareness process is so important, being able to figure out what really that decision is doing for us. Because ultimately, I think we all either want to feel better or not worse, right? But we need to be able to understand how all of those decisions are correlated and impact future outcomes, which brings me back to what you originally said, was you're having these informational interviews with your clients and you're trying to figure out what is it that you really want, because we need to align everything from your finances to your personal habits to that goal, and that's how we get there.
I think that there is, even when I've become comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. And so I'm able to have, whether that conversation become emotional, whether it's confrontational, whatever it needs to be, I can have that conversation where doctors say, well, Eric, I can't talk to my team the way you talk to people. Like, I don't know how to, I can't do that. And it's like, well, you can, but you're going to have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like, it's not your natural way to do things. And so you're going to have to put yourself out there. It's like, I was talking to someone the other day about, and the idea of, masculinity. Some people, I said, I was talking about somebody, sometimes guys are taught, you just got to be tough all the time. You have to be tough, right? You got to never, whatever, show emotion or whatever. And I was like, it's actually way more difficult to show emotion. It's way more difficult to put yourself out. It's easy to just be tough and shut down. It's hard to actually communicate. It's actually hard to actually tap into the things that are uncomfortable. And so I was like, it takes way more strength to do that than to just shut down. It's like the person who's in the leadership position who thinks that they can just yell at people. That's not how you lead people. Even the military, when I was in the military, so these movies will make me laugh because it's like, the idea of yelling at someone's yelling in their face in the military. I'm like, that only happens in boot camp. That's 6 to 8 weeks, right? Out of a career that might be 30 years. It's like nobody yells at somebody out of boot camp. If somebody walked up to you and yelled at you, you'd be like, what is your deal? Why are you yelling at me? I mean, in fact, it's completely opposite. When you're out to sea or wherever you're deployed overseas or whatever, you have to motivate people who might have just gotten a Dear John letter. Someone who's missing the birth of their child, somebody who's homesick or whatever it ends up being. You just have to motivate these people. So it's actually the opposite of what TV portrays, is that great leadership in those circumstances, the most difficult of circumstances where you actually can't fire somebody, right? And is that's actually where the military actually shines, which the Hollywood doesn't show, is that great leadership actually comes in those difficult times where you have to motivate people who are motivated by different things, and you can't treat everyone equally. And going through the tough times, the Navy SEALs have this motto of the only easy day was yesterday. And the idea is that Yeah, whatever we're going through, we push through, because if it's not easy, that's because the only easy day was the day that's behind us. Ultimately speaking, that the great things in life, to accomplish the mission, to get to the other side, it's going to take discomfort. It's going to take challenge. It's going to take pushing through and sitting in the cold plunge for more than 11 seconds or whatever it is. And people do create that story. They go, if I go in this cold plunge for more than, it's not that bad. It's 11 seconds. I watched the amount of people I saw put their toe in the cold plunge and then drop back right out. I'm like, people are dropping $6,000 on a cold plunge tub, by the way, who've never done a cold plunge. It's like, go somewhere and do one first before you drop $6,000 on the tub that you might not ever get into.
Wait, so how long did you stay in the cold plunge?
That's a good, I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that. 11.2, no, I'm just kidding. I went online and it said 3 minutes. So I pushed the 3 minutes, and I will tell you the entire time I was like, I mean, it's hard to breathe. I was really surprised how long it took to breathe, but I did the 3 minutes, and it's always just like anything else. It's always most uncomfortable at the beginning of any process. So when you first get in there, it's highly uncomfortable. And then after a little bit of time, it's not as uncomfortable because your body is brilliant, amazing, and it understands what it needs to do. And so, it's pushing through this process, and so I think that what we can do in life is learn that the beginning of any process, whether it's transforming your financial health of your business, adding on management, personal growth, physical training, it's always uncomfortable at the beginning. If it was easy, well, they say everybody would do it. So most people are not willing to become comfortable at becoming uncomfortable, right? They're not willing to become good at becoming uncomfortable and realizing, hey, this is it. I talk about the sigmoid curve at Tower Leadership all the time. This idea that great organizations go through periods of discomfort and uncertainty. That's what they do. They reinvent at certain times. And the failure to do that is why companies ultimately go into maturity and decline, is because at some point they did not reinvent. And the challenge with reinventing is the longer you wait to reinvent, the more challenging it becomes. And we can see that same correlation with physical health, right? The more out of shape we become, then the more difficult it is to get back into shape. The more time we let our marriage slip, we let our mind slip, we let our business slip, or whatever that ends up being, the more challenging it becomes. So the greatest thing that a company can do is do reinvention while they're actually in a great place, which is challenging because there's no compelling reason to do it. And so that's what happens. Even if you're in great physical shape, right? You'd have to push yourself again, even though you're already in great shape. That's what happens. And so what people, they wait so long to actually make the process and the shift. The longer they wait, the more difficult it comes. And I watched a guy run it. I live in Kennesaw, Georgia, and I watched this guy run to the top of Kennesaw Mountain. Kennesaw Mountain, for any historical buffs, is where Sherman had to get to the top of it so he could plot his attack on Atlanta. So he had to get to the top of this mountain. And so it's this mountain that, and there's still cannons, and it's very historical. It's kind of neat. But I saw this guy run to the top. And it's no easy feat to run to the top of the mountain. This guy's 85 years old. So his son's with him. His son says, look at my dad. He's 85 years old. He just ran to the top of Kennesaw Mountain. And it was cool. And so I was compelled by that. Like, that was really interesting to see this guy, 85 years old. Like, there's people that are 22 years old, can't get up the mountain, let alone run up the mountain. And this guy's 85. It's on his birthdays. That's what his son says. So I said to this coach, I said, well, how do you run to the top of Kennesaw Mountain at 85? And he said, well, the trick is you can't start at 82. It is that he was like, you got to actually start, 30, 40 years before that. Well, I think growth and development's the same thing. And I think building great organizations are the same thing. It's the compound effect over a period of time, and the quicker we go to work on building ourselves and our organization, and the more comfortable we get with becoming uncomfortable, the greater the outcome, and the greater our ability to run to the top of physical or metaphorical mountains when we're 85.
I love and appreciate the concept that you're describing of it being a process, and a lifelong process at that, because, when we were talking earlier about, having an uncomfortable conversation, for example, or yelling at our team members, I think while I don't necessarily see, not often, a doctor yelling at his team members, we do have these adult temper tantrums that we throw, right? Either we get really quiet and stonewall people, or we do these passive aggressive things. You know, I had a client once tell me, he was like, "Oh my gosh, it was a terrible day. It started with this guy. He backed into his parking spot and I needed to go. And he was like, so it just started off wrong and I was in a terrible mood, but luckily none of my team noticed." And I was like, "Oh, they noticed. Don't tell yourself that your team didn't notice." But when you talk about it being a process, you know, there's going to be a process to that development as well. And I think being really graceful with ourselves throughout that process is important, because when we get the courage to finally say the things, it actually might come out in a way that's a little bit sloppy and doesn't land well. And that's got to be okay, because we're practicing. And then the next time we have that type of conversation, we can think about it in advance and try and make sure that our words are more aligned with the message we're actually wanting to share. So all that just to say, you know, I'm sure that guy didn't make it to the top of the mountain the first 10th or 100th time he tried, but he kept working at it, and now he's fantastic. And you know, I don't handle things the right way. The other day, we talked about blinders, you and I, recently. The other day, my husband and I were talking, and he said, "Hey, can I just say something?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "If there's another approach to what you have to say right now, it might land a little better, because here's what I'm hearing." And he knew that's not what I meant, but he also could recognize that what I was saying was affecting him in a certain way. And I appreciated that perspective. I'm like, "You're right. That's not what I mean. Here's what I mean." And I was able to re-say it. And so, you know, even when we study this stuff and we're practicing it, and we are intentionally trying to grow and develop, we're going to do it wrong. And that's got to be okay. It's got to be okay. And I say that for all of our doctors and leaders out there who get a lot of it right. And it's really important to get it right. And in some cases, we're training for years on how to be precise and accurate in everything we do. When it comes to matters of the heart or matters of interpersonal relationships, those are processes. And so it's not about perfection in each step. It's about the trajectory. And I want to make that really clear.
It takes a long time, and even then there's no way to be perfect. You're still going to mess up, right? But that's all part of getting better. I agree with you. I think it's, I really try to focus, on intentionality and communicate intentionality and be intentional in communication. I talk to people about adult parent and child communication, and this idea that, when we're adult communication, which you were just explaining, is a phenomenal place, because when you speak to someone as an adult, they come back as an adult typically. But when you go into parent or child, they typically come back as a child, right? There's a big difference between, you never take the trash out, you need to take the trash out. And, when you don't take the trash out, it tends to make me feel unappreciated. And I know that's not what your intention is, but, and so there's this way we communicate, and I see it in dental practices often, and where people are trying to communicate, but they're coming from a place, and it's not intentional, but not knowing how to communicate with people in a way that ultimately connects with them. But you're not going to say it in adult every time. Like, there's just no way. Like, we're emotional beings, and so we're going to say it wrong. But you're right. The more that we communicate, the more we use our tools, and we learn how to communicate with people, the more impactful we're going to become. Nobody became, no one got to that place overnight. It's like, it's not on or off. It's a process of growth and development and tools, and knowing, what can I grab in the tool bag and grab right now that would help me in this situation. Going back to the military example, it's the same thing. It's like, I always love, the idea of, like, when I was so young, to be on an aircraft carrier and having to deal with those situations, because it educated me on the fact that people need to be talked to differently. There are people that you need to tell a different story to, for them to become motivated in that situation. So if you only have one tool, that creates a challenge, right? Because then you're like, you only have one tool. That's all you got. It's the stern tool, or the nice tool, or the over communicating tool, or whatever that is, that tool you have, and it's like, you got to become really good at being able to shift in different gears for different people. And it's like, well, I don't need to do all this stuff. I just want to build my business. It's like, well, this is building your business. Building your business is the ability to motivate people including yourself, to get the job done, to build something of significance, to build something great. And it happens because of the fact that you've got to be able to communicate people. I mean, I love what's happening in the dental industry right now, because it's like, these hygienists, I can't find a good hygienist. Hygienists are so hard to find. Right? It's like this constant, do you know a good recruiting company? Do you know where I can find the secret well of hygienists to get, it's like, yes, there's low supply in the marketplace, but ultimately they'd have to have a compelling reason to come work for your organization. And it's like, well, I'll pay them more. I'm like, you'd be surprised how that doesn't actually work over the long term, because at the end of the day, people still, there's been so much research done on why people work where they work and why people stay where they work. And it's even, I was listening to a class from Wharton School of Business, and they were talking about culture being why people come to your organization, why people stay at your organization, and then ultimately how performance is measured and how that affects culture. And so it's people have to have a compelling reason to come into your organization. And that might be personal growth. It might be the ability to it could be compensation, but it typically often isn't, because why do they stay that organization? If there isn't leadership, if they don't become better, because people that are of growth need to be in a situation where they grow, right? And so if, for instance, if someone hires me in an organization, they're like, Eric, we just want you to plateau for the rest of your career. Like, that's never going to happen. I'm going to always. And so what happens is if you can't grow these people, I always say an organization has to grow faster than its people. Because if the organization doesn't grow faster than its people, the great people will leave to go find an organization in which they can grow. But that means you have to grow, because if the organization ultimately isn't set up for those people to grow, then all you have left behind are the people that are complacent, the people who don't want to grow. And that's the organization where we get into maturity and decline, because the organization as it isn't actually growing and reinventing itself. Organizations have to continue to grow faster than its people. When an organization is growing faster than its people, it will attract high-performing people who want to be successful and want to perform and want to contribute. And yes, the compensation might be higher. You'll actually have more money to compensate people, and you'll have higher profit margins because of the fact that you're investing in growth in yourself and your other organization. So even this hygienist thing, I've told people before, I'm like, you want to have more hygienists you know what to do with? Build an organization worth coming to. And then people are like, yeah, Eric, I need a recruiter. But the people that have listened to that advice and have actually done literally what I tell them, now there's steps behind this, of course. But when I've told them exactly what to do, they're like, I've got more hygienists than I know what to do with, Eric. They're everywhere. I can't even get them in. I've got more doctors than I know what to do with. I'm like, isn't that interesting? This stuff works. You can't be a commodity in the marketplace. You can't look like everybody else. You got to have some compelling reason why people come to your organization. And it can't just be compensation. That might get them in the door, but it won't motivate them, and it won't keep them there. So what about your organization, and what about you as a leader is so compelling that somebody would want to come to your organization, and they'd want to stay there, and they'd want to help other leaders grow and develop? That's got to be where you start, and it's got to be where you ultimately find people. So this idea of developing leaders is, gosh, this is fun stuff. Chelsea, I can talk about this stuff all day. This is good stuff. This is where it's at.
Oh my gosh, I know. And when those connections that you're talking about, that authenticity, the growing processes that we go through, those really are the connective tissues that create these family-like environments that people keep coming back to. Because you're right, we all have our own reasons for coming somewhere initially, but when you think about where you frequent, whether that's where you buy your food or where you spend your leisure time or where you want to work, all of those things, it's because of the feeling associated with the experience that you're having. And so we need to ask ourselves, how do we create repeat experiences for people that are ones they want to have? Because if we're not asking ourselves that question, don't fool yourselves. We are creating repeat experiences with people. They just may not be ones that they want to have. They remember them, though. Whether it's on the forefront of our minds or not is kind of irrelevant. It's on the forefront of their minds. I work with various sizes of organizations, and Some of them get me involved on the forefront. It's proactive. Our people are healthy. We want them to, grow. We want them to be healthier. We want them to have access to supports, resources, and tools. That's fantastic and ideal. Some organizations get me involved. They're like, we're about to lose this doctor. That one's on his way out the door. Could you please save this practice? We don't want to lose any more people. And when yes, I can try and do what I can try and do. But when I'm having these conversations with people who are leaving organizations, more often than not, those conversations are about their belief about what they're experiencing day after day, that they're not interested in continuing. And it's not about the pay. It's not about the commute. It's not about the title. It's about their human experience. And so it just can't be discounted, the incredible importance that this type of work and emphasis has to have on creating those environments of safety and trust, on the having conversations that are vulnerable and connecting, on creating a space where, like you said, if you talk to me as a child, I'm going to show up as a child. Well, we need to talk to everybody as an absolutely incredible person with potential that I can't possibly measure, but I'd love to be a part, I'd love to be a link in your chain as you get there. And if we're all looking at it from that perspective, we can create something really powerful, but it has to be a focal point. It can't just be an accessory or, a post that we put up before our main presentation. It's got to be something that we learn and study together.
I love that. And, I shared a study recently because I was talking to doctors about when you lose an associate every 3 years. We were talking about compensation plans and we were talking about the compensation plan piece, the tactical piece behind it. But before that, we were talking about, so we kind of first talked about organizational health, and then we talked about the tactical piece and creating compensation plans around long-term retention. And so the first part of that was, I was sharing a study that McKinsey did, and it was over 27 countries and over 3 million different team members. And what they wanted to find out is what is the number one contributor to growth and profitability. And so it was actually just a very objective study. Hey, what's contributing to growth and profitability? And they looked at it and they said, well, this is the top quartile. And the top quartile had 3 times the growth and profitability as the bottom quartile. Well, that's interesting. So they went back and they said, okay, what is the difference between this top quartile and the bottom quartile? Because that's pretty significant. I mean, 3 times the growth and profitability, that's pretty huge. And so they found out that it was organizational health was the number one contributor to growth and profitability inside of an organization. And more specifically, they said the number one factor of organizational health that contributed to growth and profitability was direction. People want to know where they're going. They want to know that there's a future there. They want to know who they get to become. They want to be led by somebody who can they look up to and be inspired by the direction this person's taking them. Because at the end of the day, isn't that what they're doing? They're trusting you to be the leader, to provide the direction for their life. And that's something you should take extremely seriously, that you get to be this person who's providing this direction. But understand, they have to want to be led by you, and they've got to be inspired by the direction that you're leading them. So you have to communicate that direction. You have to know that direction. You have to be the type of leader that people want to ultimately follow through difficult times, right? When it's easy. But are they going to stay with you when it gets tough? Are they going to stay with you during those challenging times? And they're only going to push through those challenging times if they truly believe that you're the leader that can get them to the top of the mountain, that you're the person who is going to be that beacon that helps them with their personal life and their career and those types of things. And there's no signing bonus that can replace that type of leadership. There's no dollar an hour more that's going to change that type of transformational leadership. So when your organization when it lacks direction, when it lacks leadership, people don't even know where they're going, and they will go find a leader who will lead them to where they want to go. And so putting that time into your direction of your organization, communicating it, over communicating it, right, over and over again, so that people understand, what can I become here? What do I become in this organization? It's not what you're getting in the organization, by the way. And that's what we think. I think so oftentimes we think, well, it's all about what they're getting. It's not true. People are more concerned about what they're becoming. Are they becoming more happy? Are they becoming a better spouse? Are they enjoying their life? Are they becoming a better version of themselves inside your organization? Because you think it's all about what they're getting, but it's not true. And that's where I think there's such a, this gap between what people think that team wants and what they truly want. And yes, people want to be compensated for the value they bring to the marketplace. So I don't think anyone can disagree with that. But if people feel like they're becoming unhappy, becoming less, they're becoming toxic or whatever it ends up being, they will leave that organization regardless of what you pay them, because ultimately speaking, they're there to. I mean, every human resource study shows that people don't come to work for money. And it's true that if you cut their pay in half, they'd probably leave, but that's not why they become to an organization.
Absolutely. I was smiling inside when you were describing the transformational perspective of, giving yourself a lot of pats on the back for being the leader, and then that transition to what that leadership mantle actually means. It was making me think, do you have older kids? My oldest is 20. And I remember when he was learning to drive, and young drivers, they're all about, I'm a driver. And they think that what their music is, everybody needs to hear their music. Everybody, 3 cars back needs to be able to hear their music, and that they're all going to be impressed because I'm the driver. And then, you grow up and you see enough car accidents and other things happen, and you realize it's actually an incredible responsibility being a driver. And you're responsible for this, not just your safety and the people in your vehicle, but being aware of everything and everyone going around you in vehicles and not. And I love what you said here. And I know that everybody listening is just falling in love with you. So Eric, tell us more. What is it that you do? What is it you do personally and at Tower Leadership? And how do people access what it is you're offering?
What we do as an organization is, I think it starts off with a question, and that is, what do you want and why do you want it? Which is, I always tell people, want what you want. I mean, we work with organizations that we work with small organizations, and then we work with dental groups that are over $100 million. And it's still the same thing. It's still want what you want, why do you want it? And ultimately helping those people create a path to get there. I think that we, as an organization, are looking for great people. I think that's one of the things we are, we're always looking for great leaders, people who are either great leaders or want to become great leaders, and then want to then learn the acumen behind how then do I take this leadership and put it into building a profound organization that is one that impacts my life, my family's life, my team, my community. People, realizing that. So we usually start our process with a 2-day workshop. We spend 2 days with me, and as you can see, I can talk. So spend a day or two with me, and we talk about how to build a transformational organization. And our process starts, and we usually just have people all the time who just reach out at info@towerleadership.com. They come from a lot of different resources and places and referrals, and they reach out to us info@towerleadership.com. They say, we'd love to learn more. Our team reaches out, and usually we start off there with just 2 days where we spend with doctors who want to learn what it means to create a transformational organization, both from a financial standpoint and from a leadership standpoint. And I think it has to take into account both.
I love that. And is there like a specific time frame, or is this things we discover in that 2 days?
Yeah, we spend 2 days, and then what we do, of course, after that, we have a coaching process, and we have consultants, and we have those, depending on what someone needs. But we do giant leadership retreats where I'm giving away a Bronco this year, Chelsea. I have to tell you this.
They're so cool.
So we do this leadership retreat. We do this giant leadership retreats, giant stage and huge screens. We do this every year, and so we have this amazing event. And last year, I announced that we're going to give away a Bronco for strong leadership. And I told the doctors they couldn't win. And you saw the frowns, but all the team members were like, woohoo. And I was like, we're going to incentivize. Like I said, I'll just take money out of my back pocket and incentivize people to become leaders within organizations. And I said, so doctors are nominating their team, and one team member is going to walk out with a $75,000 Bronco just for being an awesome leader, incentivizing leadership. Because, I think you should put your money where your mouth is. And I do want, we want to build that. We have leadership academies where we train leaders inside dental organizations to grow in their own leadership and leadership development, because I found that there weren't a lot of resources inside dental to actually train great leadership. And so training leaders, and then of course we have all kinds of workshops on business acumen, and we have our own CFO and accounting and everything that helps a doctor say, I want to go from here to there. But we're trying to help them become leaders within inside the organization. And then working with people like you, Chelsea, who do phenomenal work and your impact on this industry. And so, we're kind of I'm an intrinsically motivated guy who loves seeing people create organizations of significance and impact. And so our mission, our passion is to help build organizations that impact other people. Ultimately, I want to leave this world better than I found it. And I do that by helping individuals create organizations of significance and impact so that they'll impact other people, that those people will impact other people. I got this letter recently from this doctor who's worked with me for a few years, and he just wrote this long letter about the ripple effect and how the work we've done has created a ripple effect through his community, his family, his team, his legacy, the conversations they have. And I think that's the greatest thing we can all do is live an infinite life that lives on past us, and creating, in this organization of significance. I was talking to this doctor who does full arch cases recently, and he was telling me, Eric, I'll take a young lady who's 28 years old, who has no teeth, and give her this beautiful smile. And because of that, she'll get the job and she'll get the spouse and then create family. And that's infinite, right? So I think, because that will literally live on generations and generations and generations. And I think one of the greatest things we can do is create an organization to impact all these other people. And when we do that, it's interesting because I've studied financial wealth and built financial wealth. I've made more millionaires I don't even know what to do with. But interestingly enough, you get that by serving people. You get that by helping people. The more people you help, the more value you create, the more times you impact somebody. It's funny, people will pay you to help them, right? If you really care about people and you want to transform people's lives, you can get really wealthy by taking care of other people. It's like if you help everybody get what they want, they'll help you get what you want. It's funny how that life works. And sometimes when we're so self-motivated, we can't figure out why we can't get there. And it's because we're focusing on ourselves. Sometimes when we focus outward, we get everything we need inward.
It piggybacks.
Well,
it really does.
Strong. It does. Chelsea, I'm so happy to be here today. I could say on here, I know we don't have all day, but I want to thank you for allowing me to be on this podcast. I've been looking forward to this podcast for a long time because I respect the work you do, and I'm just thankful to be here today and to share a message and to have this message with you.
Well, I've been looking forward to it too, and I appreciate all of the schedule changes and trying to make things collide. And it was just, it was what I was thinking it was. Every time there's that many interruptions and delays, I always know it's going to be a really good message, and you definitely delivered. And I know everybody really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time today and being on the show. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my honor.
Have a good day.